Good evening and welcome. This is Enlightening Your Way. I am your host, Nancy Lombardo. We are airing live on blogtalkradio.com/Lilydale Radio, and of course here on the Lilydale Assembly's official Facebook page. I am a full-time resident here in Lilydale, New York. I'm a spiritualist and interfaith minister and healer. I am also president of the Church of Living Spirit, which is an independent spiritualist church here in Lilydale. I am a military veteran and a retired police detective with a combined 32 years of law enforcement. I'm also a group fitness instructor, and yoga and wellness is my passion. My show is a combination of many of my life experiences that will feature various topics and guests to help enrich one's mind, body, and soul on your pathway to healthy living. This show will also air on my Facebook page, Wellness with Nancy Lombardo, where my motto is protecting and serving your well-being. And I'd love to introduce tonight my special guest, Patty Stovall. Patty is an international psychic medium, a spiritual coach, a master teacher, advocate, and founder of the nonprofit Sounds of Sarah, providing a variety of prevention, education, and public services that focus on the dangers of illicit fentanyl, counterfeit drugs, and addictions. With over 20 years of experience, Patty has made it her mission to help those in need of healing. Patty's mastery lies in working with individuals who have been affected by loss, grief, addiction, which is what we're going to be talking about this evening. And good evening, Patty. I'm so happy and thankful that you have agreed to be my special guest this evening. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you, Nancy, for having me. I am very excited to be here this evening.
Like we said, we both wear a little bit of multiple hats, don't we?
Yes, we do.
We both actually met in Lilydale. You were here finishing up your master teachers, I think, and we have a mutual friend of Lisa Williams. So we'll say a shout out to hello, Lisa.
Oh,
and you were one of the people that I just liked as soon as I met you, and we had a joint mission, I would say, about suicide.
Yes, very much.
And getting the word out about that. But then I think your life took a little bit of a turn quite quickly after that, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Right after master teacher, as a matter of fact, probably about 5 months.
And I know this is so difficult, but I would be very blessed and if you would share your story with our audience here this evening.
I'm happy to do so. So most of my life, I've been affected by addictions. I grew up in a home with two alcoholics and addicts. It was really tough for me, but my parents got recovered when I was 12 years old. So I did have a lot of healing when I was younger, and but addiction runs in my family. A lot of mental health runs into my family. And I did marry someone who also had struggled with some of his own issues as well. I have 2 children, and one of my children also turned to alcohol and drugs in her early teen years. And those years were kind of tough for us, but not until she was a little bit older. I have a son who had some medical issues, and my time and attention got turned to him. And so she didn't have a lot of attention on her. And I think that was a lot of as a mother, I was a single mother at that time. I take some of that responsibility of not giving her some of that attention during those times of her life. And so I think maybe about her high school years is when we started to notice things started to happen, and especially around the mental health and her depression and things of that nature. And she started to turn to some prescription pills. As we know, with what's happened in our country with the prescription opiate epidemic. That's a lot of what when I look in reflection, that's where a lot of that started with her as well, taking Adderall, taking a Vicodin. She did start in that aspect of that. And then she got pregnant and put all of that down for a while, and met another individual who introduced her to some other types of drugs, some heavy duty drugs in her middle 20s. And it really went amok at that point. It was a real struggle for me and for the family. We tried to get her some help. It was really tough.
It's a terrible, terrible cycle, isn't it?
It was a terrible cycle for her, because not only did, in my career, I was an addictions counselor earlier in my career. It didn't matter what I knew. It didn't matter what my education was. Even if I had a master's degree, it didn't matter of any of that. I was still a mother of a child who had an addictions. There was a lot of codependency played around with that. I made a lot of mistakes as a mom. I didn't know what to do. And I work with a lot of moms today, that say, what do I do? There's no right or wrong answer with that. And so it was tough. I think that support was critical for me at that point, to find people I could talk to about it.
Absolutely.
But she really went down the last 3 years of her life when this individual introduced her to some heavy duty illicit drugs, heroin, and we had to make some decisions. She had 2 children, and it was really painful, especially when we tried to get her into treatment, and then she returned to some illegal things where she was stealing for her addiction, and it was tough. It was really hard as a mom to watch that happen to your child, and how that related to grief. Because I think it's really important that we talk about that, because there's an ambiguous grief that goes with that. It's this grieving while you're grieving someone who's living. And so it's a silent type of a grief. And
Yeah, it's that rabbit hole they're going down, and you see them going down, and you're trying to pull them out
and
while dealing with
I
that
was
grief.
going down with her,
Yeah,
this is grief, and this grief of like trying to live a life and feeling like I was losing someone I loved. I lost someone I loved, and so it was really tough. And who do you talk to about that? You can only say so much, because an ambiguous grief is someone who is mentally or physically and mentally not available. And she was on the street at sometimes. And so the last year of her life, we let her fall really hard, and she was arrested for some legal, and she went to jail. And it was the best thing that ever happened to all of us. It was the first time she had time to get clean. And it was the first time I had an opportunity to speak to my real daughter at that point.
sometimes I tell people that I was in a narcotics division that when I worked, and sometimes putting them in jail was a good thing. It was the first time they could get sober for a period of time, and people, it's hard, but sometimes it is a good thing, and you
Yeah.
could actually talk to her.
And I had an opportunity to connect to her, to that little girl part of her that I had missed for many years. And the system didn't really support us the way that we were hoping for, to get her what she needed while she was there, but we were fighting, hopefully as she was coming out, to do that. But the addiction is very powerful, and there was a significant other that had a little more power over her than we did. And I think I'm one of the things in reflection that I'm grateful for was that time we had for her, because if she were to die and we didn't have that, I think it would have been worse for us. I had that connection with her to say some things that we needed to say, not only myself, but her children and her father. Had a little time with her. But 8 days out, she was given something, and it wasn't what she expected, and it was a fentanyl poisoning. Um, so um,
How
we
old was she,
know
Patty?
she was 33. Um, we know that she didn't want to die. She had plans for her and her children. But from the toxology, we knew that um, that wasn't, you know, her. It was a poisoning that happened to her, and so grief has been really tough for me. Um, Grief is
First of all, I
tough
can't
every
even.
day. Every day it's tough still, but um, I've taken that and turned it into something that's given meaning and purpose to help others.
Does your spirituality as a person who's a medium and
Mhm.
that believes in the continuity of life, has that helped you through this process?
It's interesting. Somebody asked me that in another interview before, and part of me felt like it was harder that I had that.
Why's that? That's interesting.
Because I know what it's like on the other side. I feel like there were moments, um, because I've connected to spirit so much in my life, and that love and connection, and I know where she's at, that when I'm in that when I was in some deep, deep moments of pain, that it could have been very easy for me just to say, I could go there. I could go home with her. And I had a friend say to me one time, well, go. If you want to go, go. And then it dawned on me that, wait, I have lots to do here still. I'm not ready to go. But being that spiritual part of me and knowing that love and connection over there is beautiful, um, it was a little tough, you know. But um, I do feel like I do feel like yes and no. So, I'm grateful for my spiritual development. I'm grateful for the connection I have with my guides, and I'm grateful for my connection I have with her, because I do have a very good relationship with her. I do feel like I am being guided to do what I'm doing now with her. Um, Sometimes I ask her to slow down because it's moving so quickly.
Right.
uh, Maybe too fast some days. I'm tired a little bit some days, but I do feel like uh, there are a few children over there that are helping me make this happen.
Probably a lot of children that have sadly died from this form of death. First of all, they say the loss of a child for a parent is the hardest loss. I'm not a parent. I can only imagine the pain that you have been in, that you are continue to be in. But I do know you're working your way through it. You're definitely working your way through it. And although we are spiritualists, that physical person, that physical connection is not here. We suffer that same kind of loss as
Yes.
spiritualists, as it's something that's just innately there,
Mhm,
and then it's not there.
mhm,
So I'm sorry for what you're going through for sure, but you seem that you've been able to start navigating through your grief.
mhm.
Do you know what it was that got you to like a pivotal point where you think, I'm going to do something with this pain?
Um, I don't know if it's one thing particularly. I do know that I do believe that, everyone's journey in grief is personal. And I also really believe that, you know, I have a different belief that there are no stages of grief. By no means. I do
Oh,
believe that it is a cycle of grief, and you will cycle those grief feelings, stages, whatever you want to call them, sometimes 100 times a day. Um,
and I
uh,
also think there's no length in it'd be like, how long is this going to take? I don't think there's any length in grief.
Yes, I agree. And someone told me one time, I will grieve forever. And that was a huge relief for me. And I said to her, I said, what do you mean I'm going to grieve forever? She says, because the greatest loss is your greatest love, is your greatest pain, and you carry that forever. It's a matter of building your life, rebuilding your life around that loss. And that to me clicked. And I thought, oh, okay, well, there's really no end to this, and I'm going to carry this forever. So, how do I rebuild my life around this? And I thought, as a human, because we are human, living a human life, even though I sway to the spiritual, and I come back to my human, I need to make space for my grief. And when I can make space for my grief, then I was able to move forward and allow myself to sit in the past where that depression may lie at times, that those things that what happened, how did this happen, and allow myself to sit there when I need to. And then some of those things that are in the future, that anxiety that we have, like she's not going to see her kids go to school and graduate. She's not going to be there for the wedding of her daughters. And allow those feelings to emerge, come forward when needed, but not to stay there long. And to ask myself, where am I at times, so that I can pull myself back to the present and do the things that are self-care, because when I can do that, then I can move forward in life. But I need to allow for the feelings to come forth, because if you don't allow for the feelings, you can't heal at all. And so I think that's what helped me, is to know that it's okay to grieve. And one other thing was very significantly important, is to find people in your tribe. Find people who have lost children. If you've lost a spouse, find people who've lost a spouse. If you've lost a pet, find people who've lost a pet, and understand that they'll understand you, but they won't understand your grief. And it was very eye-opening for me, and it helped me to heal quite a bit. And I'm very grateful for that, very much so.
You said a couple powerful things. I even wrote that one down so I wouldn't forget. I do believe you have to sit in your pain, but not sit there, oversit, because you could sit too long. And I love that you said the comment to build my life around it,
Mhm.
because you're right. I think it is a lifelong grief, and it
Mhm.
is a way of how am I going to move forward feeling this and still be productive in society and in this life that I'm still here to live, because it's hard to see past that. You're right. So many mothers and parents and other people, sometimes they think maybe I should just not be here. Maybe it's easier not to deal with all this, because it's difficult to deal with it and
Mhm.
figure out how you're going to deal with it.
Mhm.
And,
Yes.
as they say, one day at a time, one step at a time.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. And I think people are afraid to say it, because if they say it, then, oh my goodness, people are going to think you're crazy, but everyone feels it. We feel it because it's painful. It's very painful to be there. And, I just, we have all these emotions that come up, but then, the other part of it is, when I step into the other part of it as a medium, sometimes I had clients that will come and they'll be holding that stuff for years, 10, 15, 20 years. And they come to a medium and they think, we'll do a reading, and wow, I've been holding that guilt and shame for 10 years, 15 years. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, and then you hear they've had cancer or digestive issues or a heart attack or something's physically manifested in them because they've been holding that in their body for so long. And so when I work with people who are dealing with loss and grief, we try to make sure that they're moving forward in their own way, because the first 2 years are tough in grief, really, really tough. They're the critical time of your grief. That first year is tough. Second year is tougher, the hardest part. Everything is triggered. I'm in a grocery store, a song comes on, "Wah," I start crying, I
Right.
see something that reminds me of her, like a Little Mermaid thing, "Wah," I start crying. It just comes, and you have to allow for that to happen. But if you don't, we're eating our feelings, we're drinking our feelings, we're medicating our feelings, and then it turns into something later in our life. It affects our relationships. So it's important that we're processing through it as it comes up.
And I actually heard you say a few things when you were telling your story about the guilt,
Mhm.
and to let us, I'm sure you understand, I understand, alcohol, drug addiction, it's a disease. Okay. Number one, it's a disease, and it's easy to try to guilt and put the guilt back on ourselves. I should have, I should have, I should have, I should have. And
Yeah, I talk about that even in not even in any kind of people hold a lot of guilt. I wasn't there when they passed. I
yes,
wasn't
all,
what all of this. I should have done this. Shoulda, coulda, shoulda, and they just eradicating the guilt and the shame is almost the number one thing because our loved ones do not hold any of that when they pass. They do not. I can't even express that like enough.
we know that as mediums, so we know that to be true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They do not hold any, our ego does not go with when we pass. That's a human thing here. Um, they're in love. You know, they don't have that there. It's us that hold that. Um, and I have some exercises that we work on to help with that, but eradicating that, letting go of that guilt and shame is really, really critical.
Would you say there's I don't want to say easy way, is there a way to do that for some people that are having difficult time releasing that?
Mm, I think it will come in time, because in the beginning of a loss, there's so much shock. There's this,
Yeah,
our body goes into shock, our brain goes, there's a lot of brain activity that happens for
or
that.
not happens like walking like a mummy.
Well, yeah, well, there's a lot where it goes into that like protection mode in our brain to protect us because our body is in shock. Like it's being protected. And so I think, if you're on the path of healing and you're taking care of yourself in the self-care process and you're moving through your feelings, it will come in time. Don't force your healing, don't force your feelings, allow things to move through as they come up. You're going to come across anger. Healthy anger is good. When it comes, you're going to feel it. It's okay to feel angry. I think people are afraid of anger, but if you process it correctly, it's okay. Um, so I think we want to it just needs to come in its own time.
And I love that word allow. I mean, we use that a lot in mediumship, but I love that word through this process also, just to allow what's going to happen
Right,
and not make it go force it anyway. Because I
right.
don't think there is any right or wrong when you're going through this much loss, this type of a loss. I mean,
Yeah. And because I've dealt with a lot of ambiguous grief before she passed. So I'd done some of my work previous with her. And so there were some things that I didn't feel after she passed. And
were
there's
you dealing with
also,
that because you had some kind of premonition?
I did have that. I told that to Lisa before, but there's this, I've lived my whole life with addiction. and I said this and I felt guilty saying this. I'm 56 years old and it's the first time in my life I don't live with addiction anymore.
That's huge. I mean, that's huge.
But it's at the expense of my daughter being gone. You
Yeah.
know, so
Yeah.
that's hard to say.
It's very hard. I feel your pain and I'm sorry. But let's turn this to a positive because
Yeah.
I love the sounds of Sarah.
Yes,
I
yes.
love the name of it, first of all. It's beautiful.
Thank
Tell me how you came up with this
you. Okay.
and the motivation behind it.
Okay. So I came up with that because I found a letter after Sarah passed that she talked about how she couldn't speak about how she felt. She struggled with her mental health. She struggled with talking about her feelings. She wrote one to her dad and she wrote one to me. And she
I love
said,
that.
I have the letter, and she said, this is the only way I could, express how I feel. And I wished I could have a relationship with you. It's very moving. It's very powerful, but not only Sarah, there are many, 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 I work with many many moms who have lost kids the same way, whose kids struggle the same way. Their voice, they just didn't share what was going on with them. And so I really feel like the sound of Sarah is not just for Sarah, it's for these kids. And so the butterfly represents a magnitude of children who just never had a chance to express themselves. And yeah, so that's where that kind of came from. It was
And
her
I think a
voice.
lot of kids now express themselves, of course, through texting. I mean, it isn't very vocal. There's not a lot of vocal taking place. It's much easier to write, to print, to text. And they do encourage journaling to tell your things you can't say. Put it on paper.
Right.
Put it somewhere. So
Yeah. So it really was just giving a voice to not only her, but all the kids.
okay, that's the title. So now what is the nonprofit?
So the nonprofit really focuses around raising awareness and prevention and public service to illicit drugs, fentanyl, and to addiction, and really focused on that. We are also certified through our local state department to distribute Narcan, which is important life-saving drug to reverse opiate addiction, to reverse opiate overdose. And it's important because my daughter passed from a fentanyl poisoning. And they're in our state, in my county, we are the second largest county here in my state to lose individuals to fentanyl.
I'd like to clarify a couple of things. Like I said, I worked in a narcotics section. When I was working, methamphetamine was huge. Heroin was starting to come around. I've been retired 6 years now, and fentanyl was not even coming into play. So it has come into play hugely in a short amount of time, to the point that the Drug Enforcement Administration is now calling it the deadliest drug we've ever seen.
Absolutely.
Those are strong, powerful words.
Mhm.
For people that don't know what fentanyl is, it is a synthetic opioid. It's a Schedule II narcotic. Okay, you can legally get this with a prescription. It is a pharmaceutical fentanyl, but the ones we're referring to is the illicitly manufactured fentanyl in clandestine labs that are illegal, and they're putting fentanyl. We were just talking about this before we came on air, right? To the tune of maybe a couple little
Grains of salt.
grains of salt in pills. I mean, blue pills, you wouldn't even know it's there.
Correct.
And people are taking these because they're being other drugs, they're lacing it with all sorts of other drugs, methamphetamine, heroin, and people are taking this without knowing they're taking it, and people are dying in droves.
Mhm. Yes. And so one of the programs that we have is, we have two sets of categories of individuals. We have ones who have struggled with their addiction and they're taking something and dying. And then we have a whole other group of individuals who are young people who decide that they're going to try maybe an Adderall one time and they're dying, or maybe a Percocet or a Xanax to, they're going to try something, these young kids. And we're talking the highest growing population of young people who are passing today are between the ages of 14 and 19 today. So the fastest growing is because they're taking one pill. That's it. No addiction at all. And it's absolutely scary. I mean, we know that in 2021, 107,622 people have passed from overdose, and 70,000 of them are fentanyl poisonings. So I mean, it's a scary thing today.
I believe they said we're up 55% from last year.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's over half from last year. And for people that also don't understand the power of fentanyl, it's 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. I can't even my mind around that. That's just crazy powerful. But understand this is used in a legal way. Okay, it's a painkiller. It's given to people after surgeries. It's given to people in advanced stages of cancer. So there is a legal use for it.
Correct.
But sadly, it has turned into this huge underground $400 billion business that's killing people
Mhm.
at a rapid pace. At
Mhm.
a rapid pace.
Yeah. Yeah. It's scary. Really scary.
And
So,
it is people like you, sadly, that have suffered this horrific loss of your daughter unexpectedly. You can say that she had the addiction, but it was still unexpected.
right.
It was
Well, people
still,
back in the day were not passing from heroin or cocaine or their addiction. They were not passing from those type of things unless they were really using mega amounts. People were not dying from that. I mean, we see the spike in the time frame right around COVID when that started to happen. And people weren't, our overdose numbers just weren't there like that. So it's sad to see this. And then we have a new introduction of xylazine that's moving in, and that's, oh God, that's a whole other ballgame in itself. But that is a whole different thing to talk about at a different time, maybe. But
but like I said, I'm glad that you have used your pain and your grief to roll it into outreach and education of to everybody of what's happening out there. And it's taken your individual pain to bring it to this level. And you've done miraculous things in a very short amount of time, just with your nonprofit. And you were telling me all sorts of other people that have different nonprofits in this whole area, or in the spectrum,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. There's a lot of shame, and there's a lot of stigma around it, and I think that's the issue. I put up some billboards in my area, and I get a lot of calls from that where people will say, "Me too." And I think that, to me, is very powerful when someone can say, "Me too."
It's very powerful. We're not taking any phone calls tonight, but if anybody has any comments or any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat section, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have concerning anything we've talked about this evening, for sure.
And if
I want,
anyone needs help, they can dial 988.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And there's all sorts of numbers of crisis lines or any kind of help you're needing, for sure. I wanted to give a shout out to my special operations division back in Lawton, Oklahoma. And earlier this month, March 3rd, they made a very huge narcotics seizure of 86 pounds of methamphetamine, 18 pounds of marijuana, 212 grams of cocaine, 10,000 fentanyl pills, 621 Xanax tablets, guns, and $25,000 in cash. And this is in Lawton, Oklahoma. We're not that big of an area, but these kind of arrests, as we were talking about earlier, are happening all over the country,
Yeah.
all over these kind of seizures. So this is happening in very large numbers, very quickly, and it's a rapid problem that's killing many people. And our whole theme, I think, tonight, your poor Sarah, bless her for sure, suffered through her addiction and sadly end up dying through it. And our purpose here is to save lives tonight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Educate yourself, your children, and yeah.
And get the word out there.
Mm-hmm.
We can't hide behind this. You can't be
I know you're
embarrassed.
not alone. I think it's really important for people to know that you're not alone. If you're struggling, if you've lost somebody, find that support.
I like what you said about the support, the different supports, parents that lost children or animals, because I do think it's important, the dynamics of it, that
Mhm.
give you a better understanding of what kind of grief you're feeling. I like the way you said that,
Yeah, yeah,
to find your tribe of grieving.
yeah.
But
I
find
agree.
it, dude. It's so important to find that support system and not sit at home in your grief by yourself,
Mhm.
because that
Yeah,
could be a scary place to be.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, if I could give any tips for grief, it would be, you know, take self-care is important because, walking grief is very personal. It can be very lonely because, my grief, people aren't going to understand my pain. They're going to understand my loss. They're going to understand the loss of my daughter, but they're not going to understand that feeling, that grief that I'm feeling inside my feelings. It's sometimes lonely. And so self-care is important, even in the beginning, to take care of yourself, even if you're just getting out of bed and brushing your teeth and eating or
Right?
taking a walk. Self-care is very important. And it's okay to feel. Give yourself permission to feel. I've heard many, many parents say to me, they've had family members say, "Aren't you over that yet?" That's the worst thing that you could say to somebody who's grieving. No, just tell them no, I may never be. Ask for support and allow for others to help you. It's okay to get loud for that. And there's no rules in grief. I tell people there's no rules, there's no steps, there's no hill climbing. You're not going to hit the top. You're going to fall down. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. So
Can I ask you if I know some people have problems with even asking the questions or maybe approaching you and wondering what they should say or what they shouldn't say.
mhm.
What do you say to that?
um, yeah, we talk about that quite a bit. Some things are left unsaid. So sometimes it's just listening. Just listen. I'm sorry. Um, just I understand. That has to be hard. you know um don't give Sometimes I one of the things that is if you're that person is talking about their grief, don't give your experience too. Just listen to them. I'm around a lot of moms who've lost children too. I don't need to tell them my story if they're sharing theirs. I'll tell my story when it's the right time. So just listen to them is important. And sometimes I've had people just come to my house in the early part and just sit here. They didn't do anything. They were just here. Just be present. And this is another thing that's very, very important, I think. Um, don't tell someone, if you need something, let me know. Don't do that to someone who's grieving. Just either maybe drop off a meal, or because honestly, when a person is in grief, they don't know what they need. Their mind is not in a place of even processing how to get out of bed sometimes. I mean, I didn't get out of bed a lot in the beginning. I don't even know if I ate half the time. So just, you know, do something maybe nice, or, you know, they probably won't call. I'm just telling you. They probably, I didn't. People aren't going to call and ask. So just, yeah,
I
that's
love
one
that.
of the
Those are
things.
great. Those are great tips. Those are really great tips.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people just don't know how to handle it, for sure.
Yeah. And that's why people disappear. People always say, like, oh my gosh, the people I thought were going to be there weren't. And the people who were there, got in the trenches with you, will surprise you, because people don't know how to handle grief. They're scared of your grief, and sometimes they will disappear.
Yeah, I totally believe that. I've seen that for
Mhm.
sure. So I would like to end this talk about telling people how important Narcan is and how important it's going to be in not only now, but in our future,
Mhm.
as this drug is still flourishing all over our streets. You said you had an incident just the other night where you knew somebody that had died outside of a restaurant and no one had it that could have possibly saved an individual's life.
Mhm.
So I think it's important to get the word out. You said that, what'd you say about the thing you have in your area that they're putting out now?
We have a machine that looks like a cigarette machine, and then we fill that with Narcan, and then anyone can come and get it as they need. That'll be it. But we do have boxes that are outside of different places, stores and different locations here in our area. But if anyone needs it in our state, so let's just back up a little. So there is a law in certain states. If you go to my website, you can click on, we have this thing called Aaron's Law in our state. It's a law, it's a Good Samaritan law that allows any individual, it's a lay liaison law, to administer Narcan. So I could administer, a mom, a dad, whoever can administer it, and it protects you as a human being. Of course, we know that if someone's having an overdose and you give them Narcan, it's not going to hurt the person, and if they're not having an overdose at all. You can give it to a newborn, you can give it to a pet. You know, you can give it to someone who's 80, you know, all the way up to whatever ages, because sometimes we've had a pet sniff something in a park and they've had to give it to a pet. So, but everyone should have it. Everyone should carry it. Everyone should have it in their first aid kit. Why? You know, I always hear all the time, oh, I wouldn't need it. Why should I have it? You know, but you might not need it, but your child's friend might come over and accidentally take something, or somebody in a restaurant might. You just never know when something will happen.
Yeah, I think the big why now is that you might just save someone's life.
Right, exactly. You just might. And in that situation in our area, our local police department, some of them don't have the supplies they need. And that officer that arrived at that site didn't have it. And we're working with them now to get what they need here locally, because they're not all educated here either. We're just now getting people educated, and yeah, it's tough. I think that it's really about education and awareness, and you know, people, they're not even aware of what's happening.
Right, and it is getting the word out, and that's what we're doing here tonight, and that's why I'm so happy you joined me to talk about this difficult topic that you have done wonderful things with. It's soundsofsarah.org, yes? Is there any other information you'd like to put out there?
No, we just have a fundraiser coming up soon, and
Oh, that's right, your little walk, that's cool, yeah.
yes, we do have a walk coming up soon.
I don't think you told people where you were at.
Oh, we are just south of Chicago in Northwest Indiana area
Yes.
location here. So, but yeah, we're good. We're plugging away, and I'm
Yes,
still
you are.
teaching grief courses.
And you're still doing readings once a
And
month.
I'm doing readings once a month. Yes, I'm busy, of course.
Well, I thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to be on our radio and Facebook Live this evening. I adore you, and you know that. I love you, and I love the work you're doing right now. Patty, thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for joining me. We'll be back here again in 2 weeks for Enlightening Your Way, where my goal is to help enrich your mind, body, and soul on your pathway to healthy living. Please come to this page often, the Lilydale Assembly Inc. Facebook page, to learn everything that's going on about Lilydale. And I hope you'll enjoy some of the pictures that I post that help capture the essence of Lilydale and make you feel like you are a part of our home. Also, please like my page, Wellness with Nancy Lombardo, and my website, wellnesswithnancylombardo.com. My goal is I am protecting and serving your well-being. It has been my pleasure to be with you this evening. Thank you so much, Patty.
Thank you,
Until
Nancy.
next time, good evening.